Well met, lords and ladies, Jacob Butter speaking, and a warm welcome to this week's Walking Wednesday, which I'm definitely recording for the first time and not doing a full retake because I forgot to mention something and I want to make sure this video doesn't go on for too long. I'm going to try my best to update because there's a lot of stuff happening this week, but first of all there's one topic that is of extreme interest to everyone that I've talked to so far, which of course is my family, but either way. So once again, at the risk of alerting everyone except for the people who are going to ask me about it because they don't watch Walking Wednesday apparently, here is the topic of extreme interest that interests everyone for your viewing interest. So remember a couple of weeks ago where I said that I got a job thanks to Gacha, or at least partly thanks to Gacha? Well, the job in question, of course, first of all, seemed, as it was demoed to me, using 6 videos that were already made by a company called Truth Labs in partnership with Google or something along those lines. And they decided to ask me, Denethor, who you've heard before, decided to ask me about this, and then I went ahead and translated the first one as best I could. Which of course was a bit of wasn't exactly what I wanted to do exclusively, because as it turns out, back in the day, I say back in the day, it was 2 weeks ago. Back 2 weeks ago, when Denethor asked me for a bunch of things that I've done over the years on YouTube, my best contributions in terms of editing, voice acting, I included songwriting in there as well, to see what kind of original content or different forms of technology he could actually use to help further his startup company, which is in partnership with True Labs, in partnership with Google. So basically, I sent that off and I was like, okay, well, I hope that some of this, he seemed to be interested in the things that I do, the way that I do them. And then he got back to me and was like, I sent it off to the people from, the Google team. They said, can you please just do the things that we asked, the translation stuff. So I did, and after I kind of recovered from sickness, I got back to it, and basically I finished those off on Sunday, I think, and then sent them off to Denethor to look at. Then on Monday, he forwards an email to me and says, "Oh, well, I'm going to be sending this off to the Google team to see what they think." Basically, the first 2 videos they're the same video, but one has Spanish text, one has English text. And the interesting knowledge that people want to hear about apparently is the fact that Denethor has now got back to me, and he said, "Well, we've got very positive feedback on the videos." I'm like, oh well, so that's great. But of course, everyone else is like, oh wow, this is tell everyone, tell this relative here, tell your dad, tell whatever, So I'm like, you know what? That's it. I've covered that. The thing has been said. Let's move on to the more interesting topics at hand, because that was, of course, the recent part of the week. Let's go back to the origins, the beginning. And speaking of the beginning, Lily Trescot MSP, truly a gacha pioneer. For better or worse, that depends. We will continue to see as my reviews of her channel continue to progress. But one of them was done, I believe, on Thursday. I can't remember exactly. And that was of a series. You're supposed to give a trigger warning for the start of, if I mention the title. It is called Abused Child, which was similar to the hated child trope, came about around the same time, and Lily Trescot helped to popularize with her first soiree into the world of Gacha, which at the time was just Gacha Studio. Now, I have never used Gacha Studio in my life. I started off with Gachaverse because I was told, oh, which one's the more recent one, which one should I do? And Jay and Natasha both said it was Gachaverse. I was like, well, I guess I'm making Gachaverse stuff then. Perfect. So I did just that. And then immediately they went, well, why are you using Gachaverse for? Gacha Life just came out. And I was like, well, why didn't you say that before? And then I've never looked back since. So, all good. But that meant that, of course, I've never actually experienced Gacha Studio for myself, It's always been just it's always been mainly Gacha Life and Gacha Club ones that had more staying power. But yes, of course, like looking back, there are some things that I kind of expected to be there by default, like props, a few more poses, especially people are falling down and such, make sure they don't land flat on their backs if they were pushed from the back, stuff like that. There's one particular scene I remember where the two kids were hiding from the parents, having an argument, but they weren't hiding behind anything, so they were just crouched down. And the implication, of course, was they were supposed to be like a wall or a box or anything along those lines, really. And there just wasn't. There just was nothing there. So, with that in mind, it was just a case of, well, let's sorry, there was a path here. Yeah. Okay, let's it was just the case of, okay, well, I mean, I'm glad that Emily's here to clarify, because Emily grew up with Lily Trescot, was there during the first original days of Gacha Studio, and was able to clarify a lot of this stuff. And one of the things that Emily said stuck with me. She liked to remind me that this was groundbreaking when it first came out. I was like, well, okay, you know what else was groundbreaking when it first came out? The Mutant Girl, which is my transition into what I was going to say also, which was that there was a Gacha review that was done about me this week, done by none other than William, or William YT I should say, and also Wipeout Radio Fan 14, aka Jonny, both of whom were supposed to join me for a stream of Jazz Pops, episodes 1 through 3, starting off season 2, and that was supposed to be making up for how often I actually missed out on, keeping up the watch hours and such, and giving people more long form stuff than just premieres and things like that. But that's not how it worked out, because my internet decided to fail on me, as well as my computer storage, which I shall come back to later. But basically, because of that, I said, I'm not going to be there. Why not do a review on the Mutant Girl? Because I think Johnny's idea originally was going to do a review of the Jazz Pops episodes in question, but I want to cover those eventually. So if you're going to cover for me for a day, do the stuff that I can't do, which of course I can't look at the Mutant Girl objectively anymore, because I've analysed it to death, I've criticised myself way more than anyone else possibly could, and I've also keep on giving behind the scenes content. So it's nice to see what somebody goes through when I'm not really there explaining everything. I only did that when I was asked questions, in the chat, because, I'm not Jack, so when someone's confused about something, I'm going to clarify it to them with a concrete answer. So that's what I did. So of course, as William is a prolific animator, a proper animator, so watching him tear apart the stuff that I did that was, yes, groundbreaking at the time or whatever, but has aged horrendously now, at least visually, it was quite something to behold. And it's nice to see that Jonny also has a bit of a reviewer streak when he wants to. Because, yeah, Jonny will kind of go along, and he won't instigate any of the critiques as far as I've seen, but he will at least join in or, contribute and, flesh it out as it goes along. It's really all that you really need, to be honest, when you're reviewing anything. That's that's all that is required of you. So why on earth not? But yeah, it's also the case that a lot of people in Gacha just don't like to critique each other constructively. And that's kind of reminiscent about something else that happened, because I mean, obviously I have no qualms doing that whatsoever. And I will say to Jonny, of course, because he featured in both the jazz pop streams that I did end up doing and disco pops where I critiqued his things way more harshly than he did mine. You know, when it came time to do, have our daily dose of confusion, and him constantly saying, oh, admit it, this is bad, or things like that, I, of course, went, well, I mean, not really, no. It's not that everything here is bad. It's just, I mean, some of it was, don't get me wrong. But I want to go over, like, the reasons why. I don't want to just say that it's horrible. I want to say, why it's horrible, so we can actually consider that for the future, because otherwise, just saying that someone's content is bad, it doesn't give them anything to work on. Luckily for William, of course, I've constantly been trying to make my stuff better over the years. So even if it was just a case of like, oh, these visuals are so bad, it'd be so easy to do this chroma key and blah, blah, blah. Even if he had done that, which he didn't, but even if that had been the case, I still would have been fine because I've already analyzed myself. But not everyone does that. In fact, most people don't. And which brings me to the thing that I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention that this week, Rico reached out to me and told me that the Gacha Shipper doesn't want me to react to any more of her content. And the reason he didn't come to me directly is because we don't have any direct line of contact anymore because of my falling out with Jax, who was our sole communicator between each other. So that kind of put a stop to things. It's like, well, you know what? Okay, it's a shame because, people are used to seeing me traumatize myself with those videos. But quite honestly, I'm not going to complain about not having to subject myself to the Gacha Shipper content ever again. It's, dare I say, my life might be significantly better because I'm avoiding that area altogether. But it's a shame because I wanted to go through all of that stuff because I'm pretty sure the Gacha Shipper is probably one of the most prolific people in terms of actual content. Like, Muse and Girl's been running for the longest because it started sooner. But yeah, the Bad Girls Little Boy has way more included things in it, and also she has like 3 other shows at the same time. That at least you have to admire. If only the shows were good, then and admittedly each show was better than the last, but I never got round to that because I never ended up seeing the rest of it. And that's when Ghosty mentioned something to me, which is why I decided to redo this video, because I forgot to mention it. But I think that, it kind of like made me think about why, of course, no one really does criticism for Gacha like I do. And at first I thought it's because everyone dismisses the content. Because, they say, oh, well, it's mostly made by kids, therefore, whatever. But, the kids deserve to have their content taken seriously and evaluated as you would any other form of art. To do otherwise would just be to insult them. To be like, oh, you're just a kid. Your thing is not worth breaking down and, talking about and highlighting the good stuff and the bad stuff to help you improve as a creator. No, of course not. What do you know? You're a child, so therefore I'm just going to ignore you completely. Like that to me was always the prime reason why people tended to avoid going into lots of details about Gacha, or just avoid the community altogether. Or in some cases, in the case of like a lot of the really popular Gacha reviewers, or really reactors to be honest, most of them tend to either sugarcoat it or just don't go over the stuff that doesn't make sense. They'll like laugh at it at the time, but then they'll be like, oh, look at how cute this one design is immediately afterwards. And it was like, you had something there. Do you have like no contribution? That's what annoys me about like Yami, for example, who mostly just repeats everything that's just been seen. Which yes, I read out the stuff that's just been seen, But that's different because that's trying to... Sometimes I actually make a joke out of the bad spelling or other things like that. Or just have a point of, you know, going through and having being a sequence and not just have to people pause and start and everything in a much smaller, confined area. So there's much more of a reason why I do those things. But in the case of Yami, she's in the corner. She's read out the thing in question. She just goes, guys, look what just happened. I'm going to tell you again. My favorite other gacha reviewer has got to be, dang, that's a long name. I don't know if he's reviewed gacha in quite a while, but yeah, the way that he ended up doing it was he would always, he had his catchphrase of, I have questions. So he would actually point this stuff out. I mean, do it with a smile on his face. And much less of a freak out than I end up doing it. But yeah, that's at least something. That is a difference. And that is actually taking the content seriously and telling people, hey, this stuff might be good, might be bad, but it might be good, but either way, it isn't perfect. Let's talk about it. That's why I keep doing gacha review, and that's why I've done it all these years. I mean, partly because I'm also one of the only gacha reviewers who also does gacha himself. Because most of the other ones, their contribution community is just the reviews, which is fine. But, you know, I offer a different perspective in that regard, at least. So, that was also it. But, yeah, now I've kind of come to a different realization. Because Ghosty mentioned in that community post where it explains that the Gacha Shipper didn't want me to react to more of her content. It came up that I think it was, I said like, oh yeah, well, first Jackson, now this, all the long running stuff is gone, or, oh wait, no, it wasn't that. It was when, I think it was actually Beanie Boy who came in and said these gacha YouTubers don't really want the, don't like the free promotion. I was like, well, they like the free promotion, they just don't like not being praised at the same time. Someone else also said, you know, why do people not like the constructive criticism? And this is where Ghosty came in. And that she mentioned because a lot of kids mistake constructive feedback for bullying. Hold on. I'm not going to go in the road. It's too early. So yeah, they mistake the constructive feedback for bullying. And I thought, well, actually that makes a lot of sense. Because yeah, if people are that age where they're going to be sensitive to this kind of stuff, and they're not used to having people tell them no, then of course they're going to take it that way. Which I think is actually a negative feedback loop. Because it means that the people who were dismissing the content, you know, before, or sugarcoating the reaction and everything, are doing so because they don't want to make people get offended, but at the same time they're ignoring the stuff that's going to make them be better. And then, in turn, because of that, everyone becomes essentially a yes man or a yes woman, or yes them, to all these gacha tubers. Most of the comments on videos, you know, like the Gacha Shippers, or even Jonny's for that matter, they're mostly positive. I mean, it's not like I don't enjoy Jonny's content. I do. It's just that I'm seem to be the one person who's like, let's talk about this. Even the popular gacha tubers have that. The Music Freaks, hailed as the perfect show that it is by most people, and it's mainly the ones who are looking at the cringe side of gacha that even come close to pointing out that yes, this thing that is hailed as perfection isn't. Lily Trescot could be the same thing. Emily has massive nostalgia for this channel. I do not. I am going to point out all the stuff that is weird about it. That's just how it goes. Same way that I actually evaluated Emily's content from, actually not even the same era, from later on. So, yeah, considering all of that, it makes me realize that, yeah, unless there are more reviews like the ones that I'm doing, as more people kind of start doing that, we're just going to end up in a situation where people interpret the criticism as bullying, and they're going to just keep making the same mistakes forever, and then eventually will come back years later and they will cringe at the thing that has made them well known, and that is hard to shake off. It is very difficult to shake off the stuff that you're most known for if you're not proud of it. And I've seen that in some other gacha tubers and some other creators in general. They don't like the stuff that was the most popular because they've changed as people or whatever. It's kind of interesting because, you know, the Musen Girl, of course, remains to this day, and it's the kind of thing that even though it was essentially the test show at the time, it's become so symbolic now because of that particular audience. And yeah, people look back now and they're able to criticize because, you know, I'm very much open to having that happen. But I'm really not, I'm really not concerned about that. But yeah, more reviews about that, please, and more just saying that, you know, what stuff doesn't work. You don't have to say that it's bad, just say that it's not perfect. And last but not least, because I've got about a minute before I finish, the highlight of the week probably was definitely getting to actually reunite with one of my school friends, Maria, who actually you might know as Phoenix Diamondite if you watched my channel from a long time ago. We haven't seen each other in quite some time, but I just wanted to mention that briefly because, you know, we talked about like everything. We gave each other updates about all the stuff that was going on. I briefly mentioned Gacha Review, mentioned voice acting, mentioned the Google stuff, but not the stuff about them being satisfied because that came later. All those things. So thank you, Maria, for that, and I hope we can actually reunite with some more friends sometime soon. Just had to briefly end up on a positive note. So yeah, thanks everyone. Please leave a like or dislike because your opinion matters. Subscribe if you haven't already, and remember, keep creating, keep evaluating, and keep improving. And on that note, until next time, farewell.